And a very warm welcome back to the show. Just broke there for the news transmission. In part two of the show, in part one of the show, let's just recap. We were looking at tinned fruit and the decline of the usage of tinned fruit. We were kind of in discussion regarding tinned peaches, pear halves, and fruit cocktail, amongst others, including mandarins. But certainly, sliced peaches, pear halves, and fruit cocktail used to be on many a dinner table, particularly back in the 1970s, for example. It was fairly regular to see these on the sweet menu, along with pudding, semolina, or rice pudding, for example. But certainly the popularity has rather waned over the last 30 years, 40 years or more. Fruit cocktail obviously has its uses, especially during Christmas time when it's added to many a trifle bowl. But other than that, it's seen a marked decline in its use by many households. But anyway, we're moving on. Part two, it's Randolph Waite here, and it's the discussion show. It's a new setup. This is part two of the new series. Last week we were discussing what happens, and the advice we're giving on the spillages of broth mix and lentils. It was a very, very exciting show. I have to say there was a lot of interest by the general listening population, and lots of listeners were in touch, both on the show and since, with letters. So we might return to that particular topic, whether that will be this series or maybe we'll pick it up again in the autumn. We'll leave that. The producer's looking at me, with nothing been decided. But at the moment, we're going to move on to the part two, and what we're discussing is jam, honey, and marmalade. No, it's not how to make them. It's what to do when you can't get the remnants out of the jam jar, or the jar of marmalade, for example, or indeed the honey pot, or the jar of honey. It's a big problem, actually. It's probably causes as much worry to people as probably the uncertainty over Brexit, if I'm allowed to say that. For example, how many times have you discarded a jar of jam into the bin, or the recycle bin, and you've not really thought about the cost of doing so? And what I'm referring to exactly on that is the remaining jam on the bottom of the jar, or the marmalades, or the honey, as I say. We'll stick to, what we'll do, I've got a jar of orange marmalade. In fact, it's Seville orange marmalade. So good quality marmalade we have here. I'm not going to go into the who manufactures this particular brand, or anything to do with the content, other than its name and the type of orange it's been used. But what we're concerning ourselves is how to get the marmalade that's been left in the jar out, and so it's not wasted. It's a huge problem. It's massive, and this is something that's been brought to attention mostly over the last summer, when listeners wrote in with their concerns, and we looked at the volume of mail in regards to this particular topic, and that's why we thought we'd make a special show. And because of the new setup, we split the show now, and we deal with two fairly similar topics, but from a different angle. So let's move on. If someone approached you, for example, at the checkout of a supermarket, having noticed that you've maybe got some jam or marmalade on the conveyor belt, and tapped you on your shoulder and said, do you realise that you'll only eat 95% of that? It would make you think, wouldn't it? It would make you stop there and stand at the checkout, watch it move along the conveyor belt, and it would stop you in your thoughts, and you would then consider, well, that's correct, isn't it? How many times have I taken a jar of jam, jar of marmalade, or a jar of honey and tossed it in the bin when there's still some at the bottom? Now, this is an age-old problem. It's not something that's new. It's not something that just it's occurred in the 21st century. It's a problem. In fact, there's some archive material we looked at regarding the Victorians. Before glass mass production became popular, the Victorians used to keep their preserves, their jellies, their jams, and honey and stuff in earthenware, stone jars and stuff, maybe 2 pound jars or something like that, fairly heavy. But again, there was a problem because there was always remnants at the bottom which they couldn't scrape out. They actually designed a very clever utensil. It wasn't given any particular name, so it's really up to me to describe this. But it's kind of like a teaspoon type spatula with a little pinched hook at the end. It's probably a good 15 or 16 centimeters in length. That's the handle, I should say, and the spoon aperture is about another. I'm sorry, I'm saying centimeters, and I should be saying inches. It's about 2 inches, and it narrows to about 1/4 of an inch. Certainly, looking at that, it's a good 5 or 6 centimeters for the spoon and the angled edge at the bottom, and the handle's at least 30 centimeters, I'd say. Forgive me if I've not got the absolute measurements. We can always come back, get that measured up, maybe when we break for the music interlude, or perhaps even when we stop to get the weather forecast transmission. But what happened was the Victorians generally, they got the children in the household. Generally, it was the job of the youngest child who had the smallest hands to get their hand dipped into the honey jar or the jam pot and take out the remnants. Now, it's worth saying it's not a problem with all jams. We know it occurs with raspberry jam. We know it's a big problem with strawberry jam. It's not such an issue with some of the jellies, and I think blackcurrant jam, the producer's given me a little nod there. The blackcurrant jam is not such a problem. The gelatin or whatever the issue is, or the fructose in the jam making process allows the blackcurrant jam to all to fizzle out without much waste. So that's quite good to know, actually. So if you did get a tap on the shoulder with somebody maybe representing the jam police or something at the checkout, as I say, at the supermarket, you can easily just turn around you know, and quite smugly say, yeah, but I've got some blackcurrant jam here. And but it's good that people would take the time to approach you anyway, and you know, just put that little poser to you. With this jar that I have, I'm going to demonstrate very shortly exactly what the issue is. But and we have jam and honey all set up as well. Now I should say there's hardly any in the jars themselves. You know, the contents are at the very lowest edge, so that kind of represents the general idea of why it is a problem. But back to this Victorian type spoon. It's this one we have here. It's stamped. It's stamped with it's Sheffield steel or something. There is a name, but I don't have my magnifying glass with me, unfortunately. But it's obviously quite a robust tool, and this really took place to remove the need for young children to sticking their paws into the jam and getting all sticky, and possibly getting stung by wasps or that when they run out to play or something. Also the length of the utensil, the Victoria's design was primarily for the use for these large earthenware containers I'm talking about. But as I say, since the 1900s, when we've been using glass jam jars and stuff in mass production, it's something that's not changed. It's not changed its shape or its uses, and therefore you don't often get your jam or your marmalade, for that matter, or indeed your honey, not often anyway, served in plastic containers that look like jars. So let's get this one opened. Let's just take the lid off this one. Yeah, so what we've got here is a classic situation. You're doing the shopping list. You pick up the marmalade in the larder, and you automatically assume that you need more. Really, there's about 8% still remaining in this particular jar. And quite a bit of that is it clings to the inner edge of the glass. So this is what we're going to try and demonstrate, that this is pure waste. And if you over a lifetime had thrown out as many jam jars as say for example you go through a jar of marmalade a week, I mean, you're talking a huge amount of marmalade piling up over the years that's been unused, probably enough to fill, I don't know how many. We'd have to do the statistics and work that out in a very scientific way to give you some accurate figures, I'm afraid, but we won't do that just now. We're going to be taking calls. The lines are closed regarding anything to do with tinned peaches, fruit cocktail, and the pear slices, I'm afraid. And the mandarins, just to add that in. But for the jam, honey, and marmalade, if you have any problems or it's caused you issues in the past, or you've got any suggestions to help our other listeners, feel free to give us a call. We're going to demonstrate the use of this Victorian spoon. Now, because of the depth of the earthenware jugs and containers in comparison with the 1 pound size jam jars, that's 454 grams, of course, what we're going to have difficulty in trying to maneuver that long spoon into the edges and the inner sides of the marmalade. So I'm taking the utensil. I'm trying to scrape. Probably hear me in the microphone now. I'm trying to. Oh, there we go. I mean, that's just taking that spoon round I would probably say we've managed to at least salvage at least what, half a teaspoon of marmalade. I'm just going to take this marmalade now, because we've got these about 8% full. We haven't had a toast party in the studio or anything like that. It's just this is what's been left in the studio cupboards, and we'd use these for demonstration purposes. I do have some raspberry jam there, and I've got some heather, traditional heather honey. So, and again, the heather honey is there's hardly any left in the jar. I don't know who's been nibbling at it, but it certainly wasn't myself. It might have been Winnie the Pooh or something. But here we go. So there we go. There's another quarter of a teaspoon worth of marmalade being saved, and I mean that's over one slice toast, one slice of toast that you've salvaged. Better that than it going into the bin. So we'll keep going with this, and I should say that there's the Victorian type spoon that we're using cannot get into the little grooves just below the marmalade lid. You know, wherever the lid goes on, it's just not getting the maneuverability there. So we come up with an ingenious idea, and what it is it's a wooden lollipop stick, and if you take a rag, just an old piece of cotton, an old even an old dish towel, some tea towel, something like that, and tear off an edge, and if you strap that, secure it fairly tightly. Could be an elastic band, but preferably something like a staple, or even a very good knot from thread or cotton. And if you put that into a solution of tepid water, not hot, not cold, just tepid, you'd have to take the remaining, and as we say, we're talking about marmalade in this particular instance. We take the marmalade out and we put that onto a saucer. So just do that, just to show what I mean. So that's all that onto the saucer. And remember, this is a jar of marmalade which is going straight into the bin. And we've saved at least 3 servings for toast, or for oatcakes, whatever way you want to you like your marmalade on in the morning. I have to say, it is good quality Seville orange they've used, and it is not a particularly thick cut either. It's a very, very good quality marmalade, I have to say. So that's the jar empty. We say empty, but there's still remnants in there from the spoon utensil couldn't reach. So this is the point that we take the. I've got this other cup here. I've already got a prepared cloth, and this has been stapled to a lollipop stick. And if we just dip that into the water, you won't hear this being turned round, but I can just sort of let you know what's happening. Yeah, very, very good. It's the cotton is actually gathering and absorbing all the remaining streaks of marmalade which have been left on the inner glass of the jar. It's quite fantastic to see this. Now, what we do, if you've got a special dehydrating machine, for dehydrating vegetables, for example, you can pop it on there for an hour or two. You could, in essence, hang it on the washing line, hoping it's not a summer's day when there's lots of wasps and bees and stuff like that around and flies. Or you could just set up a kind of mini clothes source. Construct that quite easily with some glue and matches. Get the shape of the a prototype of the normal clothes source and just scale it down to model size with matchsticks and construct that. And if you were to therefore hang the little drape of cotton which has been soaked in the marmalade because of the tepid water, you'll find that when the towel dries off, the water has evaporated, but you've got little specks of marmalade and little rinds of orange, well, Seville orange in this instance, left on the cotton. That can be then scraped into the container of the glass jar, or to save doing all the work over again, why not just scrape it out and off the cotton straight onto your toast or oatcakes. So as you can see, it's pretty ingenious stuff, but it has been a huge issue, and it's caused a lot of our listeners a lot of sleepless nights because of this problem. And we have other products. It's not just the jams and honeys and marmalades, but you could extend that to the likes of chocolate paste and even ketchup and stuff like that. The method on retrieval would be slightly different. So don't try to get chocolate out of the tub using cotton and tepid water. It won't make any difference, I'm afraid. So bear that in mind. If there's any, what we'll do actually, we'll put something up in the message board in regards to the right procedures for other items. Okay, I think that would help everybody. And as we'll do just now is we'll stick to what we mentioned at the start: marmalade, jam, and honey. Now the producers tell me I'm going to break for our little weather update, but before we do that, I just want to quickly mention that the jellies. So you've got the likes of round jelly and hawthorn jelly. You've got red currant jelly, for example. These tend not to cause any issues regarding residue left inside the jar. A bit like the formula with black currant jam, as we're talking about, a different consistency, and the cooking procedure is slightly different, and therefore the jellies tend to just wobble out of the glass on their own. Sometimes they're coaxed out with a spoon or a knife or something, but nothing too drastic. The black currant jam is probably why it became a favourite. Certainly, a lot of people between the First and Second World War, and even afterwards, there was a huge surge in interest in the use of black currant jam, and primarily that was down to the fact that there was little or no waste, and that was important, particularly during the Second World War years. I'm talking 1939 to 1945 and beyond, until rationing ended in 1952. The rationing did go for quite a number of years there after the war had ended, but once the people had to be very careful on how much they used. And if you've got homemade jams, because you only could make so much with the sugars, there's a tendency to make more for the jellies and the ones that didn't require so much sugar because it was in short supply. The raspberry jam we have in front of us, I'll just bring that. I'm just being told we need to go for the weather forecast. I'm going to break for that. And a very warm welcome back to the show. That was the weather transmission and chilly outlook we have. Okay, you're with Randolph Waite, and we've moved on to the second part of the show. Sorry you couldn't have joined us earlier, if there are any new listeners that have come on board. But we're currently talking about how to get the remnants from marmalade jars, jam jars, and honey from the jars that stick to the sides and at the bottom. We're currently done the marmalade as an example. We've now moved on, as I said I would, before the weather forecast break, and I've got a particularly sticky jar of raspberry preserve. It's raspberry jam and strawberry jam are definitely the biggest culprits for this, and they really leave the household with a bit of a dilemma, because on every occasion when they go to make a purchase on the new jam, they're well aware that there's plenty left in the old jar, but there's something very pristine and orderly about opening, a brand new jar of raspberry jam and taking the first little bit out the top. But that little bit out the top could have been something, or it could have been a little more from the bottom of the previous jar if one had taken a little bit more time and was more conscious of the fact that the waste in an average household is huge when it comes to jams and honeys and marmalade. So this is a studio jam jar. As I say, it's a good quality raspberry jam. There's hardly any left in the bottom, and it's not as if it's an old jam. It's still a long way before its sell-by date is due. I don't recall any evening in the studio when we had scone with butter and jam. I maybe must have missed out looking at the producer, but he's not give me any indication he was there either. But this raspberry jam, raspberries tend to have the seed particles. They're very, very difficult to remove when making the jam itself. No amount of sophistication can remove all the internal parts of a raspberry, and therefore that's what makes up the whole composition, at least, along with sugar, of course, and the correct boiling temperature and the correct length of that it should be boiled at that temperature and cooled, of course. Now, one of the callers has suggested that and we're talking generally here, that we tip the jars upside down. What she's referring to, looking at this, is she has a separate ashet, a large bowl, a flat surface it is, and once a month she takes whatever jars she has and she places them upside down overnight. I mean, it's feasible, perfectly feasible. But what we're talking about in the studio is a general theme. Now, if you've got one jar of raspberry jam, strawberry jam, sorry, I'll start that again. One jar of raspberry jam, one jar of strawberry jam, and one jar of marmalade, for example, you don't want them all getting mixed up into one plate. So although I understand the listener who called in with that suggestion, and we're very grateful, of course, it may not help the average household. I mean, great idea, for example, if you've got 4 or 5 raspberry jam jars all mounted up at the back of the kitchen larder, and you want to get them all sorted out in one evening. That's a great idea. However, we're looking at the this particular jam jar and how to remove its inner contents. Something we've not touched on, and something that is very important. It's a kind of double whammy for those that suffer with obsessional compulsive disorder. Depending on the severity of the condition, some of them may not want to part with the jar. It's part of the problems, that part of the illness, I'm led to believe, where they're reluctant to let anything go to waste. So it may well be that the jar is held for a rainy day. But the other side of the coin is for someone with obsessional compulsive disorder to open up the kitchen cupboard and find a ghastly looking raspberry jam almost empty, with all the sides basically splattered. I'm talking about the insides, of course, splattered with unused jam. That would make you want to go out and buy another jar of jam just to tidy up the row and just to tidy up the neatness. So if you've got 6 raspberry jam jars all standing to attention, you don't want one that looks kind of poorly at the front. So that's important. The method that we're going to use to get the remnants from this jar are pretty much standard, I'm afraid. They're pretty much the same as what was being used for the marmalade. It's a case of getting the, we talked about the large Victorian spoon. If anyone's got a name for that spoon, I gave accurate measurements, I gave rough measurements of the spoon. But it's a sort of spoon you would, if you take your mind back to any time, depending on the age of the listeners, of course, but any time back between the 1950s and the 1970s, I can't really go back any further than the 1970s, unfortunately, my memory. But I was a great fan of Knickerbocker Glories. They've gone out of fashion, I'm sure. I never see anybody requesting Knickerbocker Glory in a cafe. I'd obviously go as far to say half the population probably don't even know what a Knickerbocker Glory is. But it was a wonderful treat, and it really was a surprise if you bought somebody a Knickerbocker Glory when they expected to sit down for a cup of tea. Usually served in a very tall, slim, elegant glass with ice cream and all manner of fruits and syrups and glazed cherry and stuff on top. Wonderful design on a Knickerbocker Glory. Anyway, I'm kind of straight off the point here. The spoon that was given to the individual to eat the Knickerbocker Glory was very similar to the spoon that we're talking about this evening. So I don't know if any waitresses or waiters, for that matter, have any expertise they wish to share. Perhaps they've once served a Knickerbocker Glory back in its glory days, and they remember the type of spoon that was used, a very specific name. We're grateful for any information. This raspberry jam, while I'm chatting here, I've gone round with a fresh piece of cotton which has been stapled to a fresh lollipop stick, and it's been, dipped in tepid water. I had done a bit of scraping earlier on when the forecast was there, so a wee bit less scraping in this particular one. But again, perfect ease. It's all come away very nicely. And if you want to pop that piece of cotton to dry off on your makeshift clothes horse that we talked about, designed by Matches, designed with matches, not by Matches, hopefully designed by yourself, then you can hang that piece of cotton over a matchstick, let that dry, and scrape that onto your next scone or digestive biscuit, or however you like to take your jam. So that's that one done. Another problem I'm just thinking here as well is, just when we're talking about edibles, there is many messy cooks in this world, and rather than take the jam from the jar into a container when they're going to put the finishing touches on a Victoria sponge, for example, they tend to put the knife straight into the jam several times, and what happens is you end up with little bits of sponge somewhere in the jam itself. Now, if you've got visitors come around for tea and scones Sunday afternoon, for example, and you've not noticed that there's these little speckles in there, you can understand why someone would maybe want to excuse himself from the company and potentially nip off and vomit in the toilet. You just don't know. So great care, and if there is any messy cooks, try and get some organisation with your cooking etiquette, and do not stick utensils into good quality jam or any other product for that matter. So that's the marmalade and jam covered. We're going to break for a bit of music now, and we'll be straight back with a final instalment, and that will be about the honey. Thanks for your patience. Hi there, and a very warm welcome back to the show. That was a fantastic piece of music. That was the Corgis, a track called If I Had You, and from the album Don't Look Back, the very best of the Corgis. I think that was a 1979 number, I'm sure it was. Wonderful piece of music. Anyway, tonight we're looking at the situation for removing the contents, that's the last remaining contents of jam jars, honey pots, honey jars that is, and marmalade. We've done the marmalade, we've done the raspberry jam. We mentioned that raspberry jam and strawberry jam are the main culprits. Blackcurrant jam is not quite so bad when it comes to getting it out of the jar. But honey, well, heather honey is what we've got in the studio this evening. There's not much left in the jar, I have to say. As I said to producer earlier on, it looked like Winnie the Pooh had got his paw in there. But honey's a real issue, and honey's not cheap. It's quite expensive, and if you get a good quality honey, that's not a blended honey, it's a good flower honey or heather honey, you will pay fairly high premium for the quality and the concentration. Incidentally, I mean, it takes one single bumblebee, or one honeybee that is, one honeybee, 5,000 trips to make a teaspoonful of honey. Now I find that quite incredible. 5,000 journeys it has to make so that we can consume 1 teaspoon of honey. So it's all the more important here that we get the honey out of the jar, because otherwise, if we don't, that poor old honeybee is going to have to make even further journeys just to satisfy the consumer's needs. So what we've got here tonight is the heather honey product, and as I say, we're going to demonstrate just here now. It's a kind of, I don't know if you can get that. It's a very, 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 very delicate kind of scrape and a squeak. And you can hear the, yeah, it's a very, very, very difficult process. But already, there we go. I could always say I've got at least 3/4 of a teaspoon that's been salvaged from this jar so far. And the difference between the honey and the jams, of course, I'll put that down, and hopefully the listeners at home can get some idea of demonstration. That was for demonstration purposes only. An idea of the, you know, they set aside maybe half an hour in their day, and with the you know, 1 day a week, for example, for different products in the cupboard. You know, just off the cuff of my head, say you sat down at 8 o'clock Monday night and you've done the jam. Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, you've done the marmalade, and a Wednesday evening, 8 o'clock, you've done the honey, and you set yourself aside maybe half an hour, maybe construct the matchbox size wooden matchbox sized drying horse, clothes horse, you know, at scale for drying the cotton, and we're talking about that a few moments ago. But with the honey, we can't put the tepid water in there either. It does, it tends to clog up there, and it doesn't dry off to the same consistency as the jam or marmalade, I'm afraid. That's because of the water content, of course, in them. Yeah, so you may well need an extra 15 or 20 minutes for the honey one. So why not say between 8 and 9 o'clock on a Wednesday evening, you do the honey, and Tuesday night between 8 and 8:30 you do the marmalade, and on the Monday night you do 8 till 8:30 with the jam. And of course, if you get everything prepared on the Sunday, so you kind of select what jars you're going to try and salvage. Do not give up your Saturday night, please, because we need you here listening to the show. That's the show with Randolph Waite, of course. That's myself, and we're here Saturday nights at 8 o'clock. And tonight we've got not long left. We've had a good show, and we've got quite a good response from the listeners. We had one caller who, what they do is they drill holes in their jars, and they hang them up upside down, and below the upturned jars they have collecting pots, and that kind of sorts out the problem from getting mixed, which was the kind of issue we had with a previous caller who suggested we just leave them upside down on a plate or an ashet, as she mentioned, overnight. Although the idea was good, we don't want our preserves, jams and honey to all get mixed in together. So I'm looking at the producer. He was he had said he was going to remind me of what was on for next week's show. That's the 2 we've done so far for this series. Remember, last year's is all available online. You go to to listen to that. The show for next week is I believe about trying on different types of jackets. These jackets which are no longer in use. Don't know if that's the word, but I don't hear much about it these days. And what we're referring to is items like a barathea. It's a kind of jacket, so you may well remember that from when people used to dress smartly going to school. A barathea. Cagoules before they were a kind of cheap waterproof, basically. Quite useful in summer months in the UK when we got rain for weeks on end, and they were kind of superseded this is before the days before people started getting silly in what they wanted to pay for fashionable waterproofs, and now they pay thousands of pounds for a waterproof. I don't know why, but that's what they do. Certainly, hundreds of pounds is quite quite the norm these days. The other thing we're going to look at is we've got cagoules Baratheas, Rain Macintosh, not often you hear that nowadays. People saying, I'm just going to nip in and get my Rain Macintosh, it looks like a shower. Again, it's a item of clothing that seems to be gone out of fashion, even though people still wear them. And we'll be adding more into the show. Good news, I'll be trying on some of these as well, so that should be interesting for the listening audience. As I say, I think we've done really well tonight. I think we've covered quite a bit of ground in regards to saving you lots of money. And as I say, if you're at the supermarket and you're tempted to reach up to, get a jar of jam or a jar of marmalade, just pause and think, have I cleaned out that one at home? Did I do my best? And if the answer is yes, then you can go ahead and make your purchase. If not, if you know you've got something left in the cupboard, leave it and come back home. You've still got a good couple of teaspoons still to go, I can assure you. Well, that's us. I'm getting waved down here. It's producer is saying to me we're out of time. It's been a pleasure, a real pleasure once again. I'm letting the clock tick towards us. We're just about there. We've got 4 or 5 seconds left. So it's Randolph Waite once again saying good night to you and thanks for your company. Bye bye.